My apologies for being late. Would the Joint Committee of Metro North and Long Island Railroad please come together? Do we have public speakers?
Yes, we have 2 speakers signed up. We ask them to please adhere to the 2-minute speaking limit and to address an agenda topic. The first speaker is Orrin Getz.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Orrin Getz. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Metro North Rail Commuter Council. I've received many complaints from Rockland commuters about the trains canceled and train breakdowns on the Pascagoula Valley line, also on car shortages. Last week's breakdown of train 1606 at Newbridge Landing was a disaster. Many of the customers were left stranded alongside the railroad track. One excuse given by New Jersey Transit is that they are very busy at the Meadows Maintenance Complex, which is known as the Mickey Mouse Club, to install positive train control in their cars and locomotives. As you probably know, New Jersey Transit is way behind in its implementation of PTC, and the FRA, Federal Railroad Administration, is considering fines against New Jersey Transit for their lateness. I can only assume that things must be really backed up at the Meadows Maintenance Complex as New Jersey Transit rushes to install its PTC equipment. To make matters even worse, the Amtrak president has warned New Jersey Transit that he will not allow New Jersey Transit trains to use the Hudson River tunnels into Penn Station, New York, unless they are properly equipped with PTC equipment. I strongly recommend that Metro North management schedule a visit to the Meadows Maintenance Complex and see what's going on there firsthand. I have worked with Kevin Corbett, the new executive director of New Jersey Transit, while I was over at Empire State Development. He's a good man, and I hope that in the future I will be able to meet with him at the board meetings and also at our commuter advocates meetings that we have quarterly. These are very important things that we can go over, and hopefully I can develop a strong relationship with Kevin again. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker is Murray Bowden.
My name is Murray Bowden. I live in Hartsdale, New York. By the end of today, I will show that positive train control is a system that's outdated and no more money should be spent on it. In order to prove that, I'm going to have to show you that the people who've been advising you on various issues have been giving you wrong information. To start with the red box at the crossing in Roaring Brook. I said it was illegal. It is illegal. And when I asked for the documentation for permission to experiment, I got a runaround. There is no documentation. They said it's okay. And Neil, thanks to you, you verified that Chuck is a good observer. I know, hide. So Chuck went up there, and Chuck looked at it, and he said, gee, that looks good to me. But the manual prohibits you from changing something without permission to experiment, and they never asked for it. Do they know how to ask for permission to experiment? Yes. Because last time we saw a demonstration about Audible at the Roaring Brook saying, if you're there 5 seconds in a box, get out of the box, get out of the box. They, in fact, asked for permission to experiment, and it was approved. So, in fact, they know how to ask for permission to experiment, and the reason they didn't ask on a red box is because it would have been denied. It would have been denied simply because colorblind people can't see red. It adds nothing to the don't block the box, which is all over the city of New York. How do you know red is not a viable thing? Well, a stop sign, the stop sign is red, but the 8-sided shape tells you it's a stop sign. When you go to a toll booth, you'll notice that there are no red balls or green balls anymore. They're arrows and crosses. simply because colorblind people cannot tell the color. So when Chuck said, gee, it looks okay to me, he bought into the mistake that's being made over and over again.
Mr. Bonin, can you conclude your remarks, please? Can you please sum up, sir?
To what I'm saying.
Yes, sir. Can you please sum up?
One of the things I'm saying is that the information that Metro North has been basing their decisions on has been faulty. Andy, if you could poke Andy, please. Andy, some time ago you said, how come they do things so badly and how come we only get one bid? Because you're listening to engineers who are giving you wrong information. And where do you stop? Well, it stops with the realization that they gave you bad information in that Roaring Book, that they give you... Let's go back and say, what purpose is it supposed to solve?
Sir, your time limit has expired. Can you please conclude your remarks?
No, I'm not prepared to conclude my remarks. I read it very carefully. You suggest I limit it to 2 minutes. This is so important. You're spending billions of dollars on positive train control, and it's outmoded. All you have to do is give each of your engineers a little cell phone like this with GPS, Waze, or Google on it, because this tells me when I go over the speed limit. Positive train control doesn't ever cover every mile of track in the United States. Waze and Google Maps do cover every mile. And it doesn't care what the engineer is paying attention or not. This tells me it's audibly if I go 3 miles over the posted speed limit. Google and Waze can measure every single mile of track in every station in every area of the United States. Positive train control cannot do that. Positive train control was designed 15 years ago for an IBM system that is no longer in existence because nobody has been able to say, this is out of date. You're continuing on something that's out of date.
Can we please stop this?
Yes.
I don't need any instruction on how Google works.
Thank you. Can we cut the microphone, please? Yes, sir. Your remarks have concluded. Thank you very much.
That's the reason the MTA is so much better. People like you have an attitude that doesn't face
May I have a motion to approve the minutes for both railroads of January 22nd?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? The minutes are approved as presented. Are there any changes to the work plans?
There are no changes to the Metro North work plan.
There are no changes to Long Island Railroad work plan.
Thank you. In that case, may we have the Metro North President's report?
Sure. I'm going to keep it quick because I think it's probably going to be a long meeting. Speaking of PTC, I'm pleased to report that we expanded wayside civil speed enforcement to the following 2 segments. On the Hudson line, Spuyten Duyvil to Ardsley on Hudson, and on the Waterbury branch. We expect to complete implementation of civil speed. Still can't hear me?
It's not working.
It's not working?
Something isn't.
How's that? Better. Okay. We expect to complete implementation of civil speed enforcement of the 4 remaining east of Hudson segments by early March. When completed, we will have implemented PTC protection against overspeed derailments due to exceeding permanent speed limits. In March, we will begin operating our diesel and M7 trains on the Harlem and Hudson lines with CSE. And I just want to call to your attention that there is a staff summary in this month's package that would request the committee's approval to contract with Bombardier to do the PTC installations on the M7s at Arch Street. Substitute bus service will be in place on the Port Jervis line on the weekend of March 10th and March 11th to support actually the installation of the signal system in support of PTC. Speaking of Port Jervis, Susan and I were up in Port Jervis 2 weeks ago for an announcement on ADA accessibility. Because of the ongoing signaling work at Port Jervis, we will be required to change the configuration of the station, and that would have required ADA compliance in any event. So we will be including a $4 million ADA project as part of the overall reconfiguration of the station environment in Port Jervis. In partnership with Senator Bonasic, who is trying to identify capital funds, we made this announcement at Port Jervis 2 weeks ago, about 10 days ago, right? About 10 days ago. In the meantime, though, because that's probably about 2 years out, our own forces will be constructing a mini high-level platform this spring that will allow for full ADA accessibility at the Port Jervis station. So it was a really nice event. It was snowing like crazy, but we had a nice event up in Port Jervis, and I think the advocates were very happy with the result. Speaking of...
I just want to add that Port Jervis is a far-flung station. It's about 95 miles from Hoboken. So it's an asset to be able to get on that train at that very distant location.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was a very nice event. We held our first service meeting with New Jersey Transit of the Year just last week. There was our last meeting actually with Bob Lavelle, who's retiring at the end of the month. We wish him nothing but the best in his retirement. We continued at that meeting to express our concern about the availability of equipment and the availability of crews. Mirandi has been bringing this to our attention. This is a continuing problem. This has resulted in trains being canceled or combined over the last several months along the Pascack Valley, Port Jervis. But we found it to be a very productive meeting, and we will continue to work with New Jersey Transit in terms of trying to resolve these issues. I'm just going to go over the operating report, then I think that's probably it for this morning. So the operating report. For the month of January, service reliability improved 2.6% over the month of December, although trains operated slightly below goal at 92.4%. The Hudson line was 93%, Harlem at 92.4%, the New Haven was 91.9%. We had a rough couple weeks towards the beginning of January because of the extreme cold temperatures and the snow. Service improved during the second half of the month, and we've been operating for the past several weeks and the first 2 weeks of February above goal. West of Hudson operated at 90.7 for the month of January. Pascack Valley was at 92.9, and the Port Jervis line, which was adversely impacted by winter weather and related equipment shortages, operated at 87.6. Fleet availability was marginal because of with Consus compliance, below goal at 98.2 as the result of low car availability and service disruptions. Our MDBF in December was below goal at 141,990 miles. Our year-end MDBF was slightly below goal at 193,883 miles. Same issues as in November. M3, M7, and M8 cars experienced a higher number of door, brake, and pantograph failures during the month of December. However, as with OTP, our equipment performance has been better during the month of February. And that concludes my remarks for this morning, Susan.
Yes, Randy.
I rode the Metro North Express this morning, and I heard from our unhappy customers about the fact that they've had only 3 cars instead of 4. And the crew says they typically get 400 people on a 4-car train. Mm-hmm. And when you don't have that 4th car, you're going to have a lot of standees. And I understand you're working now to fix that report. And I'm pleased that you were able to add back the report tracking the 5 late trains delayed by 5 or more. But really, I think you need to come up with a different set of parameters, because for 5 trains, there's a very limited amount of time when there are 5 Port Jervis line trains or 5 Pascack Valley line trains anytime. It's not like the other side of the Hudson or on the Long Island. So we need a better way of figuring out how badly the service is running over there. Thank you.
Anyone else? Shall we have the Metro North Safety Report, please?
Good morning. The safety report can be found on page 43. We ended 2017 with a customer accident rate nearly 39% lower than in 2016. The employee lost time injury rate was nearly unchanged. Our community outreach program TRACS reached over 7,500 individuals in December, bringing the total for the year to nearly 79,000, which is 4,000 above our annual goal of 75,000. And finally, our next safety focus day is Tuesday, March 6th. We will focus on areas of highest rate of injuries, which would be slip, trip, and fall, and overexertion. That concludes the report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Hearing none, could we have the Long Island Railroad President's report?
Yes, good morning. Last month, I talked to you about our service problems in December and January. Obviously, the service that we provided to our customers was not what they expect, it's not what they deserve, and it's certainly not what we tried to put out there for them. As a result of that, and as a result of the last meeting, the team at the Long Island Railroad has got together and assembled a performance improvement plan, things that we need to do to improve the performance of the Long Island Railroad. And I'm going to try to give you some examples of what things are included in there, what things we're trying to address in that performance plan. And I'm going to start with the impact that seasonal weather, whatever the seasons bring, has on our service, because we are too susceptible to problems when we have seasonal factors that affect us. And the first one I'm going to start with, just to give you an example, is slippery rail. And slippery rail is obviously something that happens every year. It is not new, it is not different. It is the same problem that persists. And we've always done things to try to address that. There are things we've tried to do more, but we need to do even more still. We're not doing enough as the impacts that we received. We need to do a better job of preventing seasonal impacts. We need to do for slippery rail more brush cutting. We need to do a better job of rail cleaning. We need to do greater application of traction gel. We need to do a better training of our train crews on how to operate in inclement weathers. So prevention is a key aspect of what we need to do more of in terms of preventing seasonal impacts. But it's not just prevention. We also need to be able to provide a quicker recovery to our system when seasonal factors still do impact us. And what you see in the picture there is the result of what slippery rail does to our wheels. On the left-hand side, you can see the flat spots on the tread of the wheel, and then on the right side, that wheel is actually sitting in a lathe, and that lathe takes out those flat spots and produces the smooth wheel that you see on the right-hand side. When we got in trouble this year with the bad week of slippery rail in early December and lost so many cars to service, we had 2 wheel throwing machines available to us to try and make those corrections. Those wheel lathes are able to produce at a rate of 1 car per shift. That's 3 cars a day for each machine, 6 cars a day if you count the two machines working around the clock. We lost in one day over 150 cars. Obviously, you can't operate like that. We need to do more to be able to recover quickly when we have those instances. During this past winter, I told you that we brought online a new wheel throwing machine at the Arch Street shop, which did not at that time have even a track connected to it to enable us to access that. Our crews quickly built it, but by the time they built it and got it in place, we were far behind the 8 ball. We needed to do more. So our action plan will show plans that will get us back to actually 5 wheel lathes that will be able to deal with wheel throwing. 2 of them are in our West Side Yard shop that I talked about a little bit last month. That project right now is currently scheduled to finish in December of this year. That's not good enough. We need to have that done prior to the winter. We need to accelerate the work on that project and bring that double wheel lathe online so that we can recover more quickly. We also had extreme cold in December and a snowstorm. There are many things we do to fight snow, many things we do to prevent rail breaks that occur in the cold weather. But again, like the slippery rail example, we need to do more. We need to do greater frequency of rail flaw inspection. Rail flaws are defects that form in the rail, particularly as they're subject to more and more tonnage over them, as we refer to it in the industry. What you see there is, in the picture, is a rail break that occurred that last week in December when it was so cold. And if you look on the right-hand side of that, you will see a little chip in the head of the rail. We need to do more rail grinding. We need to do more rail flaw detection. We need to do more rail grinding. Rail grinding would take out imperfections in the head of that rail and prevent rail breaks. Every train that runs over that imperfection pounds it. We need to do a better job of taking those defects out of the rail. We need to be more aggressive in our rail grinding. We initiated rail grinding for the first time on Long Island Railroad about 3 years ago. But we're not doing enough. We got to do more mileage. We got to get these things out of our track. We got to make them happen. So our rail plan will call for more aggressive rail grinding. We've talked about third rail heaters. We started out adding rail heaters after the 2015 30-inch snowstorm that we had on our system for the first time. We've put it in key locations like Cold Spring Harbor and up on the Port Washington branch, in areas that are susceptible to drifting snow that will cover over our third rail. We need to melt that snow because just trains passing is not enough to keep clearing the path of a train over top of the third rail. So we are going to install more third rail heaters. To do them, we've got to make sure we have the power supply. Not all our substations have sufficient capacity, and if we're going to have to increase capacity in a substation to do so, we will prioritize those things. The heaters, there's an acquisition time to get them, so we're still developing the plan at this point in time to be able to finalize dates. It's important that the plan have this very clear items that we will do. It's clear. The plan must have measurables, and we must have delivery dates in the plan so that the things we propose to do were tracked, we're kept on schedule, and we get them done when we need to. De-icing. We de-iced the rail with a spray that we run around during a snowstorm. I've told you how we monitor current flow on trains that are out there, and we prioritize where we run that de-icing machine, where we're in areas where we're starting to lose contact with the third rail. We need to have more de-icing machines. We have to have greater capability of addressing those areas when they occur. We need to investigate and embrace new technology. There's a new product out there called a switch cover, a rail switch cover. It tends to keep the heat in on the switch points, better melting the snow and ice that gets in there, and it also prevents snow and ice to get drug in when a train passes through and drags a new pile of snow into the switch. We need to keep that out of there. We've never had that technology. It's a thing we've identified. We're going to do more of that and try to move that forward. We have some old technology. Our state of good repair in some instances is not what it needs to be. We have old technology like air-powered switch machines. Air-powered switch machines are very prone to problems in the cold weather. The cold air forces condensation in the lines. They freeze, they block the lines. We don't get sufficient airflow. Without sufficient airflow, the switch won't throw when they try to throw the switch. We need to Ultimately, we'll have a project. Most of these air machines are in Jamaica, which is a key location in our system. We have a project in our capital program called Jamaica Capacity Improvements. That is a project that will take a number of years to put in, much like the work we're doing for East Side Access down at Harold Interlocking. You just can't go in there and shut the interlocking down. We need to do it piece at a time to keep trains moving through there because we're expected to continue to provide good service. So we need to go in there and make intermediate changes. I can't wait for Jamaica capacity improvements. I can't wait for capital projects that are 5 and 10 years down the line. I need to do things now. There are things we can do to make these things perform better. They will be in our plan. Switch heaters, same thing, same story. M7 threshold plates. Our M7 fleet is prone to failures of the threshold plates. The threshold plates are it's actually a forged aluminum that's in the doorway. They were all changed out when the cars were a few years old, when we had the problem with someone falling through the gap, and they were extended out beyond the car. That required putting a new plate in there that was wider and reduced the size of the gap. Unfortunately, the material selected was a dissimilar material from what the original one was, and now we're having corrosion due to dissimilar metals, and it is they're cracking, they're failing, particularly when you get into cold weather. That gets to be problematic. Doors go out of alignment. Doors don't work the way they're supposed to work. Because there's a track in there that guides the door and the way it closes. We need to do more of that. M7 or M3 cars, I told you, were a real problem because the old traction motor technology that was out there. We have the M9s in the capital program and will be delivered this year. We need those M9s. We need to get the MDBF up to a higher level, and they are one of the worst performing vehicles in our fleet. We need to recover quickly. I talked about the Jordan spreader, also known as Darth Vader, being unavailable. We can't have that happen. I don't care what happens. It can't have that happen. We need to have additional rail equipment that enables us to move snow. The Jordan spreader is great out where we're in diesel territory, but we can't run that where third rail is because it would just plow the third rail over, and that obviously doesn't work. There's other equipment that we use for that in the third rail territory. We need to get more of that equipment. We need to get it in place. We did have 2 pieces of that equipment delivered last year, and we'll look to add more to our fleet. We also have snow blowers. Again, we also need to be able to recover more quickly. So whether it's changing out traction motors more quickly, whether it's snow plowing, we also need to position crews in the right places, the most critical places on our system, and we try to do that now, but we've got to do a better job of it. We need to reduce the response time when a switch hangs up and a maintainer gets there quicker to be able to recover that. We need rescue engines that more quickly can get to the location where a critical failure occurs, can hook up to the train and get it out of the way so we don't wind up with 20 and 30 trains delayed because one train had a mechanical problem. And, I walked you through 2 of the problems that we saw in December and January, but there are obviously other seasons throughout the year that affect us and other environmental conditions that we need to be better prepared for. Things like high winds, things like flooding, things like thunderstorms with lightning, extreme heat. All those things have impacts on our system, and we need to remove those impacts from the system and make the system less prone to problems because we've done a better job of preventing them, but also make it in a way that we can recover more quickly. When I talk about flooding, we've done a number of Sandy enhancement projects. Most of them are done, but not all of them are done. We need to accelerate the projects that aren't done and get them in place to prevent flooding from biting us. One of the things we've, no matter what kind of service problem it is, that we need to do better at is communication with our customers. It is a problem. You've heard me talk over and over again about some of the limitations of the information we have that enable us to run the system. That said, there are things we can do, in my mind, to share the information we have. The same information that my tower operators and my train movement bureau have on their systems to be able to view the progress of trains throughout the system, I want to share that same information with our customers. I can't wait for centralized train control to come. I need to use and find ways, and we're working with the headquarters IT department to develop a way to actually take the information that we have in our existing system and share it directly with a website app that our customers can access and see the actual performance of trains throughout our system. The information, I'm not satisfied that it's sufficient, so as a separate effort, we're going to find ways to improve the quality and the quantity of data points that we have throughout the system to provide more accurate information. If the data points are too far apart, we lose the ability to provide concise information. By getting the data points closer together, we can more closely track the progress of a train throughout the system, giving both our people and our customers more accurate information about how the system is operating. And when you look at our communications that we use for our customers, I'll break it down into what our customers experience. One is station platforms. What do they see on station platforms? What information is available to them there? Using the improvements to the train tracking system that I just talked about, which we're trying to accomplish with more use of GPS data points, timing points throughout our system. We're going to convert the station signage on our system to a countdown clock type technology so that customers start seeing how many minutes it'll be till our train arrives on this system. Obviously, that takes some adjustments to the software, so we're working with a software provider. We've had for almost a year now some stations, 5 stations, on a trial. It's time to get out of the trial. It's time to get to the point that all stations have countdown clocks to utilize the information and get it there. There are some tweaks we still need to do. That'll all be part of the plan. We'll identify those tweaks. We'll identify the rollout time frame to be able to accomplish them. For station platforms, one of the things that I think it's, one, overwhelming, and two, we tend to rely on too much are the automated announcements. The automated announcements are things that the system generates. I want to get more human involvement, more direct input from human beings to, we can select, dial up individual stations, a series of stations on a line. There are ways we can access the different stations. We need to make better use of that ability. Too often we rely on the automated systems and we're not interjecting ourselves. When things go bad and lines are not running good, they don't need, customers get tired of hearing, you know, train so-and-so is 6 minutes late or 8 minutes late or 10 minutes late or whatever. We need to have a human come on and say, this is the problem, this is what we're dealing with, and this is what we expect the service availability to be. Second area where we interface with other customers is on board the trains. On board the trains, we have a number of things. We have automated stop signage, we have PA systems, and we have crew people that are on there. We have one group of our fleet, the C3 fleet, which is the double-deckers, that the signs, whether they be exterior signs or the interior signs, have not worked in the whole time that I've been here. We initiated a project several years ago. It's time to get that project to the finish line and get those things working on those cars. The M3 cars, I talked about replacing them with the M9s. That will give us another piece of equipment that will have full information in a much more workable fashion to give to our customers. The M3s have very limited thing. They have nothing more than a PA system at this point in time. We need to do a better job of having our crews make announcements, and that falls on us. It falls on us to, one, provide them more training in the areas of the things that they need to address. It impacts our ability to give them talking points that are key talking points. What are estimated times that this type of delay typically takes? Something they can tell their passengers, because the passengers just want to know when I'm going to move again. We have to be able to give them that information, whatever it may be. So that may be training, it may be better teaching materials that we provide. I talked before about the station platforms. We need the same type of thing for the announcers, the human interface that I said needs to occur on our station platforms. We've also got to train them. We've got to give them better talking points about what it is they're expected to communicate with our customers. The other area we need to do it is social media. Our ability to reach out to our customers through our social media devices. You know, MTA headquarters has been working on a new app that's supposed to roll out in another couple of months called My MTA. We're working with them to have our information prominently on there to make sure that the information that I talked about from the timing points is accessible from that app, that people can get information about what's going on there. One of the things we've got to do, we've got to get more active in social media, and we've got to do that by applying some more resources to the social media interface. So that's an effort that we're going to do to try to add staff in that area to be able to provide better information to our customers. We've got to do more outreach to our communities. We need to be out there starting right away to interface with the communities, to listen to their concerns, to get their ideas on what we can do better, particularly in the area of communication. We need to do a better job interfacing with our commuter rail advisory groups because they're people that understand the business. You know, one of the things I'd like to do is we have a lot of vacancies on our group right now. I've talked with Mark Epstein and Bill Henderson. We need to get some more people and get those positions filled and get them more involved in the business. We need to get ideas from our workforce. I sent a letter out this morning to our workforce describing the problem that we face, how we have fallen below the expectations of our customers, and how we need to do better. But I need them to help me to get better. And it's not just you got to do a better job, it's I need your ideas. What things can we improve and how can we improve them? How can we make the job better, easier? How can we give them the more information that we're expected to provide to our customers? One of the things I want to do is add a customer service position to the organization whose sole responsibility will be customer service. And I want to have that position report right to me so that that person has access to me, will be on top of all these things that we're talking about moving, who will be interacting with whether it be community groups, the commuter advisory groups. We need somebody dedicated to customer service throughout there. I've gone on and on. I think you get a flavor for what I'm trying to do, what the team has been working on since we last got together. We are working with headquarters. We've met several times. We've got to finalize that plan. We're in the process of doing that. It'll take probably another few weeks till we get there. Some of it will involve funding. We need to identify that and get our arms around how we can possibly accomplish that. But these are some of the things that I think we need to do to have the Long Island Railroad provide the service that we need to provide to our customers. And I have a couple more items I want to address, but I don't want to move on to them until I give you an opportunity to ask questions on this.
The end. Chuck?
Pat, I know how difficult that presentation has been for you. I counted 51 we need tos. And I know as well, perhaps more than some of my colleagues, what you inherited from your predecessor, which was a problem that you've been trying to deal with. But it seems to me the epiphany that we've heard this morning in terms of trying to get the Long Island Railroad back to some appropriate shape is one that dictates two things. One, I think we need to schedule another session in which we review what happened with the we need tos, and 6 months from now or 5 months from now, in terms of whether they were implemented, and if not, why not? And number two, money doesn't grow on trees, and we need to fund this. We need to examine whether, and this will probably bother a number of people, it certainly bothers those of us who would like to see the 4 stations in the Bronx go forward immediately, is to delay East Side access and deploy some of those funds to making this possible. Because the people who ride the Long Island Railroad, as you have noted, deserve better. As the governor has noted, deserve much better. And the only way we could do it is with the money that can be found elsewhere. It can't grow on trees. So I suggest to you, Madam Chairman, and you, Madam President, that you give thoughts to the following. One, I should say Mr. President, I apologize. Seems to me we should give thoughts to the following. One, scheduling another review session like this with an update at the most a few months from now. And secondly, finding a way within the existing budget, if necessary, delaying East Side access, to find a way to fund some of these changes. The people from Long Island Railroad have suffered long before you got there, and they continue to suffer despite your efforts, and I think we need to pay attention to that.
Chuck, if I could just respond to one aspect of what you said. In May, I'll have been here 4 years. This is not about my predecessors, this is about me. Okay, this is my responsibility, has been my responsibility for going on for 4 years. So this is not, I don't want anybody to interpret that that's what I tried to say. I did not. Okay.
Could we add the reevaluation to the work plan going forward, please? So that the next meeting you have that on?
That was going to be my suggestion, is that
Absolutely.
once we get everything in writing and have a list of items that each month, as part of the work plan, we have a review of each item to see where it's been implemented, and if not, where not, so that we have a running schedule of what's going on when in that regard.
That would work. It would
Yeah.
it would allow us to track. Does that satisfy your suggestion, Chuck?
Yeah.
Vinny?
Yes.
I know you.
Please. It sounds like we have a lot of work to do, clearly. You know, everything on the president's list involves the workforce. Everything requires a dedicated workforce, which we have on the Long Island Railroad, without any doubt. You know, the men and women that work in the engineering department on the right-of-way, in the shops and facilities for equipment, and are on train crews as well in the field providing information, all need to be supported. The bottom line is any improvements that are going to be made here are going to be made through the workforce. And this workforce is used to it. We have no problem stepping up when things, you know, get rough. This is not the first rough patch that the MTA Long Island Railroad ever seen. And we deliver, we continue to deliver. We're the ones that are there when it's going bad. So the fact that Pat has made some reference to the human factor and hearing from the workforce is music to our ears as far as labor is concerned. But then that can't spin back to resources relative to communication with social media and back to the same avenue where we may have gotten away from the basics of railroading. We have to prioritize service for our customers now. That's the most important thing that we need to do. Give the customers what they want. Nobody, listen, railroad workers hate reading the paper more than anyone in this room because we are a proud group. We love what we do. We're dedicated to what we're doing. We're out there in the weather. We're out in the field, and we're getting yelled at. And in confidence, I know I'm speaking for the craft. We need to get back to basics of railroading and put that human factor in there. We need to stop. You know, we managed here for many, many years without, and no criticism to anything or anybody or any department, but we didn't have a public information system. We didn't have a lot of the technology for decades here, and we managed. Now, we're busy now. We're reliant on technology. We're reliant on social media. We are not the labor organization that ever poo-poos technology, social media. We get it. We're with the times. We negotiate with this agency. We work hard to support the challenges, and we will continue to do so. But with that said, when we're going to start talking about putting resources back into fixing problems, let's put them where they belong. Back in the field, back on the right-of-way, back on the platforms, back in the station, not behind the scenes, not, you know, a fairy tale wish. And I'm not, Pat, don't take any offense to that. Everything that you said we need to do, and I think you're in that direction. I would just really, really emphasize the fact that if it's human factor that's going to fix this place, this workforce is dedicated and will rise to the challenge, and we'll do it. As far as information to the crews, we want it. You know, we've gotten away from that. The crews, we have stopped speaking for the agency because of all of the other means to do so. I mean, these trains make announcements for us now. We never liked that. You know, we love calling out the names of stations, but we have computers and technology to do it all. That's fine. But give us the information, give us the resources, give us the tools, because this is the hardest working workforce in the industry.
Vinny, I thank you.
Veronica.
Pat, unlike my fellow commissioner, I did not count how many times you said we should. But I did note, as he did, that it was something that you repeated often. And I want to thank you for your candor and your honesty in describing the challenges and the areas of improvement moving forward. I also want to thank you for being so clear in the reports that you give to us. I think you spent a lot of time very directly and, again, clearly explaining the challenges, and I appreciate that. So I have a few questions for you. The first is, what is the timeline for your rail plan? When do you expect to work on it and then release it to the full board? Secondly, what is the status of the Amtrak announced improvements that were announced just about a year ago in the spring? And again, I'm sorry that this falls on you, but the reason I ask is because Amtrak was very clear to point out that LIRR and NJ Transit would be partners in their concourse coordination review, for example, or the joint communication center that they were talking about, which doesn't address fully the need that you've described about improved communications throughout the entire LIRR system, but it does address a very weak points in Penn Station and communications with all the systems. And then lastly, my question is, winter comes every year, right? And as do many of these conditions that you face, and you've pointed to some of the seasonal conditions that affect the railroad. Help us understand where the focus has been. I know there have been a variety of challenges that you all have addressed, and some key mega projects that have had to advance in preparation and such around that. But can you help us explain as succinct, you've been very clear about some other challenges, but what has taken away from some of those, that core attention that you've specified very clearly, point by point? And the reason I ask that question is so that way we can better understand the resources that you need, both operating and capital. Commissioner Tessitore is talking about the investment needed on the operating side, and you've mentioned that too. So help us understand what the needs are that we can help support and provide for you and this rail plan moving forward.
I don't want to repeat a lot of what I just said in terms of the things we need to work on, but let me go back to your first question, which is where are we on the plan? When will we see the plan? The plan is, I want to say at this point in time, 75% done, thereabouts. There are still some of the efforts that we're doing that we're trying to work out dates and schedules and time frames, because when I develop a plan, I want the plan to have a series of goals and when those goals will be accomplished. So I don't want to just give you a list like I just went through and said we have to do this and we have to do that. I want to give you a time when we're going to do this and when we're going to do that and when it's going to get done, and then be able to see the impact that that has on our service. And some of them at this point in time are technology-driven and resource-driven, and I need to get time frames when those resources will be able to come on board and when those resources will be able to accomplish the goals that we've laid out for them. So that's the challenge in finalizing the plan right now, and part of it will be, you know, is there some way to fund this? What can I do with the resources that I have now? And if the resources are not available, you know, paint for you a clearer picture of where we are so we all can fight together to try and get the resources that we need to make some of the changes in the positive direction. But some of these items will certainly require resources. But, you know, whether it's rail grinding or brush cutting or whatever that I've laid out for you, or buying a new widget, you know, we need to be able to add those things to the system. Some of them, you know, I'll use the example of the Subway Action Plan where they were buying those vacuums and it took them a period of time to acquire them. You don't just go to the car dealership and pick a rail grinder or a subway vacuum off the lot. The delivery time for those is extensive, and we need to be able to give you those dates when we're going to be able to acquire that equipment and when we're going to have them working on the system. And that's the goal with finalizing the plan right now, is trying to be able to do that. Penn Station is obviously one of the largest challenges we face, and it's largely about capacity in Penn Station. There is limited capacity in Penn Station. We have 5 tracks that are dedicated to Long Island Railroad. We share another 4 tracks with them, and that's the extent of what we have. And, you know, I'm not going to...
It's not about capacity. My question is about...
The project.
No, my question is about whether or not Amtrak is moving forward with the communication, the Joint Communication Center.
I'm not sure what you're referring to, or what impression you're under for a Joint Communication Center, but there is not an effort that I'm aware of for a Joint Communication Center. There are underway, and Owen might be able to speak to this. Particularly, we had the incident where somebody set off a stun gun and then panic ensued. There is an effort at joint communication amongst the agencies, particularly since we have Amtrak police, we have MTA police, we have state police, we have National Guard, we have a number of law enforcement people there, and there is an effort to have a joint communication on that regard. In terms of station announcements, next train on such and such a track, there's no effort on a joint announcement system.
I'll talk with you after the committee about the Amtrak press release that has the 4 points. They made a big splash about it last year. It's from that I'm asking.
Yeah, and that's what I think is more the thing I described for you with Owen.
I do think the two of you should speak about this offline, and then we'll get clarification. Scott.
Thank you. Pat, I appreciate all the litany of to-do lists that you laid out, and the thoughtfulness and taking responsibility for getting done what needs to get done. Just to maybe follow up with Veronica's point, because if you go back, I think Newsday this weekend noted that the on-time performance was the worst in the last 2 decades, despite even having a good performance during the summer of hell period we went through. And so, part of, I think, trying to figure out how we're going to fix the problem is try to understand what's different, right? We've had bad patches of weather for the last 2 decades. What has changed in terms of the way we operate, in terms of the equipment we're using, and maybe as you're putting together your plan, starting with the baseline as to what's changed. Just like the subway action plan, the chairman laid out the fact that we pulled some of the maintenance people off, we diverted some of our resources that were required. I mean, it'd be helpful for us to understand what did change and why was this the worst performance year, even though we've had similar situations in the past, to sort of set the foundation for going forward. So I'd encourage you.
We'll try to incorporate that
to do that. The second thing, and I was glad that you touched on the focus on customer communication as strongly as you have. I think even as a culture, you need to make sure that is, again, re-emphasized, because if you look at the book for today's meeting, I think on page 190 where you talk about the 2018 challenges, it doesn't mention customer communication once, right? There's all these other points, but not customer communication. And so that to me is indicative of it not having been a priority. And so I encourage you to make sure from a cultural perspective that is a priority going forward. And I think your points on training and reaching out to the team members that are on the ground day in and day out to be a part of the solution makes a lot of sense along the way. But I also would say technology is critical here. And in today's environment, both customers' expectations have changed because technology has changed their expectations, right? I can go on my iPhone and see where every one of my family members around the world to the minute, to within 10 feet. And so people say, well, if you can do that, how can I not know where my train is? And so I encourage you just to maybe not reinvent the wheel. If we have to come up with a patch to try to figure this out, look at what other technologies are out there, whether it's Google Maps, what they use on the iPhone, something that helps facilitate some expedited manner to encourage this communication.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, and let me distinguish a little bit what I'm trying to accomplish here. As much as possible, I want to share real-time information that we have with our customers directly. I would prefer that our people who interface with the customers, wherever they may be, are more dealing with not the routine stuff that I can do using technology, but deal more with the stuff that's not routine, the incidents that happen and the problems that occur, so that they can focus their efforts on dealing with those issues as opposed to, real-time information. I have no problem sharing the same information that my people have in a tower with our customers. I just need to put it in a format that the customers can understand, because right now, the format that we have, I need to adapt that.
No, and again, and I thought your point on training and helping give the engineers and the other people on the train the ability to communicate effectively in those circumstances makes a lot of sense. And then just my last point, and I know you mentioned it, but I want to reemphasize that once you have this plan, for you to go out to the community yourself and with the chairman and laying out, here's the plan, here's the timeline, because setting expectations is the key for this to be embraced and people to recognize that they're being heard and create better patience for our customers as we go through the transition. And I know that we have heard a lot from elected officials and other customers who are starving for some feedback from the Long Island Railroad. And so I know you need the time, even if you just get a date on the schedule where you're going to have a meeting to put things together, I think would go a long way.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. We will.
Do we have some last questions? I see Neil has something.
Pat, thank you for that in-depth and, in some ways, to be honest with you, depressing, and I think the word litany, Scott is right. And Scott, I do appreciate you bringing this up with some intensity that I think in part drove this conversation today. I do want to pick up something my colleague to my left stated related to East Side Access. Not necessarily the idea itself, although I think there's merit to exploring whether it's feasible or not. It reminds me of the real need for this organization to start developing its own viewpoint about the sustainability of our financing. We, as Tom Prendergast used to say, we have $1 trillion asset. And depending on how you do the math, I'd say we spend about $8 billion a year on capital to work on that asset. That's less than 1% of its value on an annual basis. So if you think about your own house and how much maintenance you do in the house, say your house is worth $1 million, you know, you're spending $8,000 a year, especially if it's 100 years old. Probably not spending $8,000 and not keeping the roof from falling apart. Probably spending a lot more than 0.8% a year. We have to develop a sustainable funding model. We've got to figure out as a board what we think we need from our various constituencies. The Transportation Reinvention Commission, at least one of our board members was on. Veronica, were you the only one of the board members who was on that? Yeah. You were very clear about what the various tools we have to do. I've asked Joe, I've talked to many of you in this board, we have got to develop a viewpoint, a strong viewpoint, because you can't do everything. You just cannot do everything. You can't have 4 stations in the Bronx and East Side Access and Croton-Harmon rebuilt and Gateway and all kind and Third Track, and you just can't have it all. It is not possible, I'm sorry to say, and you can't do that faster and more efficiently. I in some ways I have great empathy for you, Pat, because it is impossible. And Penn Station rebuilding and Moynihan Plaza and you just cannot have it all. Someone has got to pay eventually, and unfortunately the tax burden in this state has actually just gone up. Thanks to the president, individually, that is. And so the one thing I'd say is, as a board, I looked at my colleagues here, not to the management, but to the colleagues, to figure out how do we suggest what is a sustainable model? Because, yes, part of this is management and focus, but part of this is financial as well. And I really think we have got to start solving this matter, or it will not be solved, and that is even worse.
Andrew.
Can I respond to Neil just quickly? Neil, well, yeah, I'm going in a little bit different direction, but I want to pick up on something you said there. And whether it's East Side Access or Third Track or a number of other projects, one of the things that this railroad absolutely does on a daily basis, it operates at maximum capacity. And we need to develop more resiliency into the system itself to be able to recover more quickly when I talk about things. And those are all important projects, and we need to keep the eye on the prize in terms of what do they ultimately do for the service of the railroad, and they will have an improvement to the service of our railroad.
Andrew.
I mean, sitting here listening to this, and I think Scott brought this up, it sounds like something has changed recently over the last year or two, and maybe it's the priorities of the management of the railroad, because you have a lot of things thrown at you now, and I don't know how much management time is being taken by East Side Access, the Third Track, the whole situation as you described in Penn Station with Amtrak. There's a lot of things going on here that I wonder if it's taken the management, the middle and upper management of the railroads, eye off the most important thing, which is daily customer service, running the trains on time, all the things you talked about, Pat. And I think if I was running the railroad, I would go back now and assess what Scott said. What happened here over the last 6 months or whenever it became really problematic, the running of the railroad? What's changed? Have we taken our eye off the ball? And you may have had to take your eye off. You may have just too many things being thrown at you at once to run the railroad efficiently and on time, and the things that are important. It just may be, I think somebody else said, too many things thrown at the management. So I think it's not only these fixes you're talking about, but I think you have to go back and take a look at the basic management, the basic priorities of the management, and what events have occurred that could have taken the eye off the ball, because you can only do so many things.
I'd like
to hear about that, you know?
And we will do so. Absolutely.
Because you may be just taking something, too many things you just can't possibly do. Out of this report I agree, and we will do that.
I think that do you have a question, Norman?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'll go in the line of, congratulating you for being the guy that takes responsibility for all this 51 menu items. They're very, it seemed very extensive. I mean, all this stuff seemed very extensive, but truthfully, from my perspective as a mechanic, it seemed like a lot of this is very basic stuff. I don't think we need a lot of training for most of this stuff. And my concern is more like, why wasn't this stuff... I guess I don't really think it was something that happened in the last 6 months. This is something that's happened over time. Is why aren't these? If you go through the shop, and you go to my guys and say, "What's a list of things that you would do to improve this situation?" A lot of these things are going to be on the list. These are very basic things, and why they weren't on the list is the bigger organizational problem. That whether you take responsibility or somebody else takes responsibility, it doesn't really matter. Those things have to get done. Now, and I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel, but I am trying to kind of take the flat spots off of it. I know that you have historically and presently have a sort of botanical strategy for dealing with the leaves. That there's you have to have at this point. I know when I worked on the railroad, there was a leaf season's coming up. These are the things we're going to do. We got to get the slime train ready to run. We got to do. So if you hit all those targets and you had your botanical strategy in place, what happened with all that stuff? Now, and the wheel truer thing, and maybe I missed something here. It seemed to me you were saying you needed track work at Arch Street to utilize that facilities wheel truer, and my recollection is maybe 8 years ago or so we cut wheels down there, and I don't know what happened in the intervening period, or maybe I'm just misremembering that maybe you do need to put track and switches in there to get the trains in and out of there efficiently, but it would seem you could have got that place online. On the other hand, the real thing is here, I think, in your defense, this, I believe, was the first bad fall you had since that West Side wheel truer has been down. And that also, I think, complicated the matter for you. But as far as technological quick fixes, I guess, to get a wheel grinder, it probably does, or a track grinding and tamping equipment and that sort of stuff, probably is a couple, 3 years lead time to get that stuff. But I believe portable wheel truers are available. I don't know to what extent. Have you considered using them? Is it something that just doesn't, you would take 2 years to get them as well? But when you lost 30% of your wheel truing capacity to the West Side Yard, it was really just a Russian roulette thing with the weather, that ultimately you were going to have bad weather and you were going to get behind the 8 ball with the wheels. So that's really, I know I threw even more at you now, but but what happened with the botanical strategy, and what are the things you have to do to get the simple things done? That's my concern.
I think you have to put all of this in your report to us. To have
do I get the final word?
I'm not sure. I think I see Chuck is taking another stab here.
That's quite all right. I think we've covered just about everything. I want to thank Pat and the staff and our labor partners for laying out what needs to be done. All of us who live on Long Island have a love-hate relationship with the railroad. I tell my friends at LIPA all the time, you guys got to do worse so you can be on the front page of Newsday and not the railroad. But that's a context in which we play. The railroad is such an important part of Long Island and such an important part of its psyche. It's one of the few aspects that every Long Islander believes is their own. Long Island is a community of communities, and most people will tell you, I live in Port Washington, or I happen to live in Stony Brook. I don't live on Long Island, I live in Stony Brook, and Vinny knows what I'm talking about. And the railroad is one of the few things that covers everybody. And when it does its job well, which it has been doing for many years, people start to take it for granted. And when it starts to have a variety of issues that come, and a number of them that come all at the same time, it gets attention that it deserves, because Long Islanders feel that it is letting them down. And that's the most important aspect of the plan. It's not just the plan itself, which, and every ingredient that Pat laid out there is important. It's the confidence that Long Islanders have that the plan can be implemented quickly, and that service will get better quickly. That confidence is what has been lost over the last couple of months. Not just the train didn't get here, but I'm not sure anybody can get my train here at the appropriate time. And when you lose that confidence, when you lose that credibility, it is very difficult to get it back quickly. It takes a variety of time to do so. And I'm hopeful, I have my own confidence that the railroad can do that, that the management and labor communities working together can do that, because nobody likes to be the butt of the train's not getting here today and it's not going to get here. We all want to be able to know that the train is going to get here at the right time, and that the people who are paying the fares, today's fares, which are high, and tomorrow's fares, which may be higher, unfortunately, are not left in a situation where they do not believe they are getting their money's worth. Because once you get to that point, you have lost all confidence in the people of Long Island. So I'm very hopeful that the plan that Pat put out there today can be implemented, that we can have a variety of reports that go on each month to know what is happening. The communication aspect of this is essential. People are willing to understand if they're told what to understand. And that's why that aspect of this is, in my opinion, one of the most important aspects of this, because it allows people to know, okay, there's something happened, the train will be here in 15 minutes. If I know that, I feel confident, rather than saying, well, something happened and the train will get there when we'll ever get there, or nobody telling them when the train is going to get there, which is even worse in that context. So I look forward to the implementation of this. I'm sure my fellow board members and I will be there to help in regard to the resources that are necessary and the timing, but this has to be done in a manner in which the people of Long Island feel they have confidence that it will be done quickly and done efficiently. And I think when they know that and when they have that, the job will be much easier. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Actually, I have to finish my report. I apologize.
Thank you to everybody for your comments.
I knew that was
he has a few more items.
Take a little bit. One item I need to mention, there was an article in the New York Times last Thursday about the New York and Atlantic Railroad and their employee of day laborers, according to a lawsuit that was filed. That lawsuit was a civil suit filed under the discrimination guidelines. That was news to us when it did happen. I sent Friday a letter out to the Department of Labor asking them to investigate this situation. I've also had discussions with the MTA IG to bring them on board to help investigate and find out for us. Obviously, the railroad can't do the investigation of New York and Atlantic. We have no powers, and since there's pending legal action that's out there, it's very difficult to get people to talk to you. So we need to get people that have that ability to get involved and try to find out for us what the truth is and what has gone on. So that's where we are with this right now. I mean, it's still at the point that every day you hear something different, a new wrinkle. We did get a copy of the lawsuit that was filed, and we have had our legal team go through that and try to learn more. So
When you have that clarity, will you come back to the committee?
I will. The NTSB, two things happened with them. We went down to Washington a couple weeks ago. They released their final report on the Atlantic Terminal collision with the bumping post that occurred. They actually produced two recommendations for the Long Island Railroad. There were more recommendations that also went to other agencies such as the FTA. It was a joint report, which is unusual, that also included the New Jersey Transit Hoboken collision, which was very similar in its characteristics, so they joined them into one joint report. One was that we undertake sleep apnea testing for all of our engineers. At this point in time, as you know, we started this early last year, is when the MTA program was kicked off after we brought on board medical providers. A number of medical contracts were awarded to get our people in for testing. We have since been at that very aggressively. We are at the point right now of over 80% of our people have been tested for sleep apnea. At a recent safety committee meeting, David Mayer indicated that we would finish by May, and we are on track. In excess of 80%. We are on goal to complete that in May, as David said at the safety committee meeting. The other one had to do with hazard analysis, and they want us to treat hazard analysis much like a risk analysis in terms of identify hazards, follow a MIL standard to evaluate the severity of that hazard as part of a system safety program plan. We have actually had a system safety program plan since 1986, I believe, Lori, if I have the date right. It has never been a requirement under the Federal Railroad Administration, which was one of the recommendations that the Federal Railroad Administration make it a requirement. It is something we will try to figure out how we can accomplish what it is they want us to accomplish. We may need to bring on some resources to help us go through an evaluation of what all these hazards are and what the appropriate evaluation factors are and determine the severity of the hazards. It's like a risk analysis that you do on a project or anything like that. We need to do a hazard analysis of the railroad. So we will undertake and we will commit to them to do that, and we'll provide them with a schedule once we get some time to work on it. The other item with the NTSB I'll mention is they put out an advisory last week, and this concerned our fatality at Queens Village last June. In terms of we need to the investigation isn't done, so I got to be careful here, but part of what their investigation is, and it identified the fact that we weren't doing enough in terms of people following our own rules. And we need to get to the point that people do follow our own rules. And they asked that the MTA headquarters come in and audit us on our people's compliance with the rules, because we have our own compliance program, and it was not identifying that people were not following the rules, and obviously they did not in this case, and in discussions it was not happening. So people were, even though the rule was there, they were not doing what they were supposed to do. We need to correct that, and you know, we will have headquarters do that audit and get it correct. Final item, Belmont. Belmont development, we were obviously not part of any of the proposals that came forward with that, but now that a selection has been made, we have begun meeting with the selected team. They are at the point that they are doing their environmental analysis of the project. So obviously interfacing with us as part of that environmental analysis, that they'll have to identify alternatives and this, that, and the other type thing. So we have started meeting with them. We've had 3 meetings, I think, at this point in time. So it will be something that we will participate with going forward, and we'll keep you advised of any impacts on the Long Island Railroad.
Can I add something on that?
Yes.
We've had obviously a number of conversations about Belmont, and this is not a discussion about whether Belmont, the Islanders should or should not be at Belmont. That's a different discussion point, which has already been decided. However, I am very concerned that Belmont is being looked at, or the railroad service to Belmont is being looked at solely in regard to what it can do with its present configuration. And its present configuration means you can only get to Belmont from the west. You can't get to Belmont from the east. And almost all Long Islanders live to the east of Belmont. And having a facility where the railroad cannot participate in getting people from the east to the arena makes, to me, very little sense. Because if we're going to put everybody on the Southern State Parkway, on the Cross Island Parkway, at 6:30 on a Tuesday night going to a hockey game, in addition to the traffic that's already there, is only going to make the traffic worse. And we need to figure out a way to get people to Belmont by train from the east, and that does not mean taking them to Jamaica and turning them around. That is not an acceptable alternative. Jamaica is 15, 20 minutes from Belmont on a ride, and nobody from Massapequa is going to Jamaica and then coming back. So I would urge the parties that be, all the stakeholders in this, which includes ESDC, it includes the Islanders, it includes the railroad, it includes the state of New York and whatever other capacity it is, to look at this in the context of how do we allow people from Long Island to get directly to Belmont by train? Because if we don't do that, it's going to have a significant impact on our travel, and it's not really going to accomplish what we need to accomplish.
Well, I see a number of people would like to respond. Chuck?
Madam Chairman, let me echo, but in a different context, my friend Mr. Zuckerman's comment that you can't do everything at once. And I echo what you say, Mitch, after we get the railroad in shape. It's time to stop wishing for better until we can get this railroad in shape.
Scott?
I want to go just to a different topic that you raised, which was on the safety and not following the procedures, because I think it does relate to our prior conversation. And when Andrew raised the point before about maybe taking a step back and looking at our management and organizational stress and structures. And I think, when it comes to safety and not following procedures, to me, that's such a hot button issue, right? And I would argue that it's a warning sign, and I think these latest events are a warning sign that in your review, not only in terms of I need to fix this, I need to fix that, but to take that step back, look at the organizational design, look at the people in the seats of leadership, and make sure we have people accountable for all the key elements. And that's what they do every morning. They get up and that's what they focus on. I know in my business, I have people that make sure operations, that's all they do. I don't let them get distracted on thinking about capital projects, because I know if they get distracted on that, they're not going to focus on operation, and that's paramount. Same thing on safety and security. And so you need to just take a step back now and recognize some of the challenges, and I'm echoing the point Andrew made, is let's look at our management structure, let's look of what the organization looks like, and let's look at the people in each of those seats to make sure we have people that are capable and accountable to executing these mission-critical elements of the railroad.
Anything else? Randy?
Yeah, having ridden to Belmont Park, it is a very, very, very slow speed move, and anything to fix it up is going to cost a lot of money. And as my colleagues here said, I don't know if there's any money available to do anything. Thank you.
Well, moving right along, the safety report is on page 291.
Good morning. We're reporting on our performance through the period ending December 2017. At the corporate and department level, we are actively engaged with our labor partners and the employees to strategically focus on the actions and the conditions that are contributing to the increases that we saw last year. So our focus very much will continue to be finding new ways to engage on the sprains and strains, which is the biggest category of injury, and then the three activities being slips, trips, falls, material handling, and struck by objects. So we're continuing to refine how we address those areas, and we'll hopefully see the benefits of that in the numbers. As far as community outreach and education, in partnership with the MTA Police, we reached over 119,500 participants in 2017, a near record number. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions, Chuck?
I note that the grade crossing incidents have again increased. At some point, somebody's going to have to step in and say to the local communities that are involved, we've got to do something on your end as well to stop this, because you have 17 incidents of grade crossings where there has been an impact. Something's got to be done, and we need to focus on that. Traffic lights don't do it. Things coming down don't do it. Boxes white or red don't do it. Something's got to be done to stop the cowboys from going across.
Any other questions? In that case, we'll have the capital construction report. Mr. Lieber?
Okay. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. We heard a few moments ago talk of third track, and I just remind you, together with East Side Access, like it or not, will deliver 45% capacity increase in the Long Island Railroad's throughput in the peak hour. And that is, warts and all, why this project, I think, has continued to be considered to be very, very important. That's East Side Access as well as third track. On third track, I'm not going to spend a lot of time because time is short. But the committee, the board approved the third track project, the Long Island Railroad expansion project, as it's formally known, at the end of last year. And one thing we know is that projects get on a good track or a bad track early on. It's the planning, it's the start of a project. I think those of us in the real estate business are especially sensitive to that. And the third track project, I think, has gotten off on a very good foot. All of the bonds and insurance have been executed. Notice to proceed was issued. The office, a co-located office, which includes the contractor and the railroad and all of the staff on the agency side, as well as the construction management staff, are all going to be co-located in Mineola. That office has been established. Design is underway. Submittals are underway, which is, obviously the critical path to getting work going is getting the submittals approved for the design that's underway. The utility relocation process, which is high risk in any project, but especially so in one which is operating in a very narrow and constrained right-of-way, has been initiated. The outreach process, which has been ongoing since well before the board approved the project, is being resumed, and I think charted out in an effective way. And equally important, the real estate acquisitions, which are 50-plus separate parcels and which represent a significant risk. If you can't get the real estate that you need to establish the logistics and the access and the process for a project like this, you have risk. And the real estate acquisitions are moving forward timely and are being closely monitored by our team. And finally, an important point that I think will be a part of this project's success is that we've created a truly integrated team. I think I've mentioned this before. It's probably the first time that we've done a project where we had a combination of railroad expertise, folks from the Capital Construction Group who do some of these big projects, and the construction management team. So those are our outside consultants. So as opposed to balkanizing projects, it's your project, not mine. In this case, I think we've created a model that I hope will be effective. So I just wanted to let you know that that work has been ongoing effectively since you approved the project. East Side Access, I'm going to be reporting, as I think all of you know, to the CPOC committee next month. A pretty thoroughgoing review that is focused on budget and schedule, and also progress on some of the priorities I laid out for you back in October. That's next month. We did a tour for the board a week ago. I would like to schedule, and I know scheduling is difficult, but I'm going to try to find another date before the CPOC meeting to give those of you who wish a chance to see the status of the project. Because when we get into it next month, it would, I think, be very useful if you'd had a more current look at the physical project. It only takes about an hour and a half, including the meetup and the briefing. So Commissioner Pally was there, Commissioner Glucksman, and Commissioner Albert Weiss brought a couple others, and I hope that folks, if at all possible, could find time for that. We have a 3-minute presentation that is about the passenger experience on East Side Access. I'd like to share with you. I know how short time is, so I'm going to give you the option of saying you don't want it. But I do want to say one thing that is, we'll talk more about it next month, which is that you raised earlier, Commissioner Vanderpool, you raised the question of Amtrak and our collaboration with them. The East Side Access Project, a big piece of the story is the difficulty, and you've raised it again and again as well, that this project has had not just getting outages, but being able to be productive in outages because we didn't have the flagging, the electric traction power expertise, the people that allow you to get individual tasks done, because you need to be supervised. Even if Amtrak's not doing the physical work themselves, you need to have the right supervision resources in order to work, or else you get shut down. And this the productivity has been bumping along at the roughly 50% range for some years now. I discovered this when I started to get into the project. It is part of the story that we'll get into about what's happened to this project in recent years. In January, that productivity for Amtrak work, where Amtrak's doing the direct work, dropped to 0. And the reason is that Amtrak had some disciplinary actions and lost some electric traction power, personnel, availability, so their usual ability to support it, even partially support the work of East Side Access, which is on the schedule, the agreed upon outage schedule, which is a ton of work has been done on to make sure everybody's project somehow could get fit in. Moynihan, the emergency work in Penn, and so on, other Long Island Railroad projects. So we hit the panic button with Amtrak in the last 2 weeks, and in response to some very strong intervention, and Ronnie Hakem accompanied me in that effort, we have seen some response to them in principle that they're shifting some of these electric traction lineman resources from other areas into the region. And that's going to have to be a priority going forward. So we'll talk about it next month, but I just wanted you to know this continues to be a very, very serious issue that is, creating a huge drag. And when work doesn't get done and it gets stretched out, you want to talk about money and cost, that is where the cost starts to run up. When you drag the project out, when you have to resequence work, when you have to pay contractors because they plan to do a job in this long and now it's that long. And it's an issue that we're going to all have to struggle with very directly and very intensely if we're going to bring this project into port. So
we appreciate that that's been a long-standing problem, and tell us how to help. If you need us, we'd be there. And on that, could we have your 3 minutes, because
Please.
It's already gone.
Thanks, Randy.
You have a question, Chuck?
Yeah. Jano, let me ask you a question. I read with some great care the amendment to the Gateway Tunnel Agreement reported on page 57 of the document, of the book. That report, in at least 3 places, assesses liability for the delays and for the problems that the Long Island Railroad has encountered in connection with the wheel-turning equipment. It opens with a fact that it was something that was done in the negotiations with Amtrak. Then we paid off, it looks like, to get Tutor Perini to give up its claim of delay. And one of the things I'd like you to, if you have time to do it, is to take a look at this, because somebody here, other than Long Island Railroad and the MTA, ought to be paying for the cost. We should go ahead with the agreement, but it looks like a real problem here.
It's really Pat's issue for a minute.
Yeah, it's an item on ours on the agenda, and if we could, Susan, I'd like to get to that point on the agenda. We got a whole bunch of things to get to, but that has been a problem for us. The performance of the team down there. Remember, this is it. Like everything else, it seems here is extremely complicated. It's Amtrak's tunnel casement that they tried to build underneath our shop. The work is impacted because it goes right through the work site of the related Hudson Yards project. The Tudor Perini works for Hudson Yards. Hudson Yards negotiated an agreement with Amtrak to perform the work. Understood. I need to get the wheel shrilling machine right now. That's my priority.
$1 million, close to $2 million, for something that was caused by one or another of the trio, not us. That's the problem with, we have to move forward. And I agree with you. But we should not put on our plate the costs that are intended to us.
And all of us agree with that. Passenger experience on East Side Access. Randy?
Good morning. East Side Access embodies a one MTA approach. Our moment of truth will be defined on opening day as we deliver a transformative passenger lifestyle experience to Long Island Railroad customers. Along with the construction of the third track and double track projects, East Side Access will provide more train choices for customers traveling to Manhattan and city residents who work on Long Island, but also for customers traveling between destinations in Nassau and Suffolk counties for Long Islanders, and as well as for Long Islanders making discretionary and leisure trips. East Side Access will now establish for the first time a new Long Island Railroad terminal at Grand Central, so we are no longer totally dependent on Penn Station, where Long Island Railroad is a tenant with little control. So let's see what the journey will look like from a passenger's perspective. For example, a nurse living in Manhattan or Jamaica, Queens, will now easily make a reverse morning trip to the Mineola station pictured here, with just a short walk to nearby Winthrop University Hospital. An example of an inbound passenger, let's say a teacher who today catches a 7:05 a.m. train from Mineola to Penn, then connecting with the subway to reach the East Side for nearly an hour commute, will now be able to leave from Mineola 18 minutes later in the morning and still arrive at Grand Central at the same time as before. On opening day, passengers will be riding on the newly delivered fleet of M9A cars with many new features. And here we're now arriving on track 303 in Grand Central Terminal. East Side Access's terminal will have the storied address, but will be finished with a modern architectural look, along with 21st century services and amenities. And with 8 new platforms, there'll be more time for passengers to board. In fact, Metro North, New York City Transit, and Long Island Railroad information, service status, and even the weather will be readily available on digital screens from the moment you step on the platform, along with wireless wayfinding to help navigate to the street. And even before you get off the train, at 140 feet below street level, Long Island Railroad passengers will be able to answer calls immediately and connect to the internet. 4 high-speed escalator banks rising almost 9 stories will carry passengers from train level to the new Long Island Railroad concourse. And in keeping with our state-of-the-art digital technology program, ESA passenger areas will be activated with scalable, immersive digital experiences which will reflect train information, art, public service messaging, and revenue-generating advertising. For example, a digital ad seen during an escalator ride, perhaps offering a flu shot, can offer passengers on the go an opportunity to stop by the new urgent care, along with 2 dozen shops, eateries, online merchants, and seasonal pop-up kiosks on the new Long Island concourse, all part of our retail strategy. Passengers will see airport-like waiting areas with charging stations. There will be multiple options for ticketing and 2 sets of restrooms. And to reinforce terminal safety and security, the MTA police will provide a significant presence, supported by a new police station, officers, and canines. The new Long Island Railroad concourse provides passengers with plenty of interior connectivity options, sheltered from the elements, to both iconic Grand Central through the lower-level dining concourse, as seen here, and the Biltmore Room, including direct connections to the subway, and even surrounding office buildings will all be in place. Giving Long Islanders access to employment, commerce, and civic centers in East Midtown Manhattan is central to what ESA is delivering. And at the same time the MTA is building Eastside Access, it's ensuring it will support a passenger lifestyle experience that sets a new service level for its travelers. Thank you.
Hearing none, we'll go on to the police report, please.
Good morning. Well, I'd like to report on an additional 11 canine units to the MTA Police Department. We had a graduation on January 31st with additional dogs from the Peekskill PD, Poughkeepsie PD, and the U.S. Park Police, all being trained at our state-of-the-art canine facility in Stormville, New York. Each dog is named after a fallen member of law enforcement, a fire department, or the military. We look forward to these officers and their canine partners contributing greatly to the MTA Police Department. And speaking of canine, this past February 13th, a 17-year-old teenager with autism was missing from a group outing out in Malvern. A major effort throughout the night between the community, Malvern PD, Nassau County, MTA PD, and others resulted in MTA PD police officer from our canine unit, Officer Doug Joseph, finding the teen huddled up in a backyard under brush, suffering from hypothermia, but otherwise okay. I congratulate all those that were involved in that find. Our newly formed Homeless Assistance Unit continues to be making a difference. For the month of January, this new unit, consisting of a lieutenant, a sergeant, and 7 officers, have had just under 1,000 contacts with homeless individuals, have gotten 33 of those individuals to accept services from our homeless services provider, BRC. And they will continue to do that work day in and day out. Now, after last month's meeting, I actually reported on record low numbers for the MTA Police Department, ending 2017 with the lowest number of crime. However, this month I have to report a spike for the month of January. System-wide, there was an increase of 13 felonies, 30 versus 17 between the Long Island Railroad and Metro North. The spike was driven by an increase of 10 grand larcenies. With a total of 17 grand larcenies for January, 15 were from unattended property and 2 were from the person. 2 of the grand larcenies were from Long Island Railroad, 11 of the grand larcenies from Metro North, and of those 11, 6 were from Grand Central Terminal. This week, as far as the daily crime, we continue to be under 1 crime per day at 0.97 crimes throughout the region. Our hate crime report, 5 versus 4, all by criminal mischief. 3 were on the train, 1 was in a waiting room, and 1 was on a signal box on the tracks. This concludes my report.
Any questions of the chief? Hearing none, we're going on to information items. There is 1 joint information item, and that's an update on PTC, which this committee has requested. It's going to be presented by Debbie Chin from Long Island Railroad. I'd like to point out that the PTC task force has reviewed this information under the auspices of Mr. Neil Zuckerman. And we look forward to hearing any comments you have about the presentation or any ways that it can be improved. Debbie.
Susan, if I could first, you skipped an action item, which was the item that Chuck brought up. So I do need a vote for that action item. This is on the wheel throwing machine to amend the agreement.
So I move it.
Second it.
I do. Those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. I am succumbing as I sit here to a cold. Whoever gets here tonight. No, I'm okay. It's happening.
Good morning. Slides?
Is this going to work?
Yeah, should work.
Please start, Dick.
Okay. The railroads have a very aggressive project schedule, as you all know, but we remain on target to have all of our lines in PTC operations by the end of the year. We're roughly collectively at approximately 62% completion for both railroads. The project budget remains at $968 million. However, Long Island Railroad anticipates an additional need of $40 million to complete the project.
This is
I
on
wish we had the
page
table.
60.
All right. Lacking the table, it will be difficult to talk about the next slide that I wanted to present to the board. At the last time we met in October, it became clear to me that we had not properly conveyed to the board that we actually already have many of the PTC requirements already in place. As you may recollect, the system that we're actually implementing on both Metro North and Long Island is an overlay system. It's the advanced civil speed enforcement system that other Northeast Corridor partners are also implementing, and it overlays on top of our existing cab signaling systems. I don't know, we don't have the slide.
We all do.
Okay, so looking at the slide, the left-hand column shows the PTC goals. Those are the things that PTC is designed to prevent.
Yes. Right.
To prevent train-to-train collisions, both Long Island and Metro North have existing PTC systems that automatically prevents red signal violations for train speeds over 15 miles an hour. With full PTC, we'll have a positive stop at all red signals, regardless of speed. This will prevent all head-on and sideswipe collisions. As a consequence of the accident at Spuyten Duyvil, both Metro North and Long Island went back and looked at overspeed derailments at critical curves and bridges. And what Long Island did was updated their cab signaling systems to implemented various modifications to prevent a train from reaching overturning speed on any curves under normal operating conditions. Metro North utilized a different approach. They advanced the use of their PTC transponders to implement civil speed enforcement, and will have civil speed enforcement implemented system-wide as early as first quarter of this year. With full PTC implementation, both railroads will also be able to limit train speeds for temporary speed restrictions. For incursions into work zones, Metro North already meets the PTC mandate, which has been approved by them. They have an employee advance protection system, and what Long Island Railroad has is a track blocking system, which through their existing signaling system, they're allowed to have a dispatcher prevent routes into work zones. Long Island Railroad will also, as part of the current systems integrated contract, is also enhancing their system with a ancillary roadway worker protection system. This new system will prevent anyone other than the roadway worker in charge from removing the work zone protection, therefore making the system a lot safer. For both Metro North and Long Island, existing PTC train limits speed to 15 miles an hour if a switch is not properly aligned. Full PTC will prevent moving over misaligned switches. For the last goal, protection on malfunctioning grade crossings, both Metro North and Long Island are currently protected by operating rules and procedures. PTC will allow a dispatcher the ability to place a special temporary speed restriction to stop trains before the affected grade crossing. The important thing to note here is that the notification of a malfunction in grade crossing still needs to be reported.
and therefore situations where a car will find itself on the tracks will a train will not automatically stop for those kinds of situations. Next slide. On the next slide, this was also at the request of the board to provide a simple dashboard to give everyone an idea of how the railroads are doing as far as the progress on the project. The four circles on the left provide the criteria for compliance at the end of 2018. So you have the radio spectrum, which both railroads already have. We also indicate the percentage of completion for our hardware installations for both onboard and wayside, roughly high 70s for both railroads. The third circle is the training completion. Long Island is roughly at 51%, and Metro North's about 80, low 80s. Thank you. And the fourth circle is probably the most challenging.
This is the CPOC presentation.
Okay, it's okay. The fourth circle is the criteria for the railroads to have at least one of their subdivisions in revenue service demonstration. In the cases of the railroads, we both have pilot lines. Metro North has one, and Long Island has two. The circle is broken up into different criteria to meet the RSD, having all your hardware installed, having your training completed, having your revenue service demonstration application submitted to the FRA for approval, and then also getting the actual approval from them. So that those four circles on the left indicate our ability, the metrics to meet the compliance at the end of 2018. What the fifth circle indicates is the criteria to actually get to completion, which is what we're striving to achieve at the end of the year. And each one of those tick marks indicates a similar circle for each line segment for the railroad. So for Long Island Road, we have 15 remaining non-pilot segments, and Metro North has 11. Next slide. Okay. So this slide here, the next three slides provide installation projections. And we've been giving this information to you in the last few CPOCs in various forms. And what we tried to do here was consolidate that information, given the fact that we're pretty much at the home stretch. The first left-hand column indicates all of the various PTC elements of the system, transponders, wayside interface units, etc. The second column is the system requirements, basically what's required under the contract to complete the work for this particular the SI contract. The third column in gold indicates the quantities required to meet the FRA goal. Now, recently, both railroads have submitted a revision to their implementation plan, basically at the recommendation of the FRA to provide the number required to provide sufficient operation. So you can see that the quantities for the wayside roughly the same, but for the equipping of the trains is a little bit less, since you really only need to have both ends of the trains equipped in order to run operations. The fourth column is what we've installed to date through the end of January. And what's remaining, and as far as the projections, is the total to get to contract completion. So what we try to do is show you how we're going to get done, not only to meet the FRA goal, but also to meet the contract. And what we did, too, is the highlighted box in green indicates the month in which we would have achieved the goal for the FRA. And as you can see for the Long Island Railroad chart, we've pretty much met our goal for the M7s. Similarly, on the next slide, you can see that Metro North also has met their goals, not only for the FRA, but for the contract in equipping all of their M7s. Metro North has divided their installation charts into two, one for east of Hudson and one for specifically the Port Jervis line, which is on the next slide. The important thing to note here is that Metro North, their installation schedule is dependent on New Jersey Transit providing the design as well as the equipment for Metro North to install. Since we last met in October, there were many key milestones that the railroads were working really hard to achieve. One of them was final design review, which unfortunately we did not meet at the end of December, and that new target date is now March. The delay in this milestone is a little less concerning than last year, as the team has done some testing and does not foresee any major system or hardware changes. The team has also reviewed and approved most of the documents that have potential to impact software development, and they've also prioritized the necessary documents required for the FDR milestone, many of them not being directly related to design, but more specifically to training and maintenance. Both railroads started their office factory acceptance testing to help mitigate some of the schedule delays. The focus was specifically on core PTC functionality. Both railroads completed their FAT in early February. Long Island Railroad had as far as meeting core functionality, an 82% success rate. Metro North, roughly 68 to 70% success rate. The testing team had to allot an additional week to actually finish the testing, but we felt it was important to test all of the functions, including the non-core functions, just to make sure that we understood or identified all of the test variances before advancing to the next phase. Given the success rate for the core functionality not meeting the entrance criteria for the start of integrated system FAT, the railroads and the contractor had many meetings to discuss the risks moving forward, and jointly decided that it was in our best interest to move forward despite open test variances. So while we're still proceeding with the integrated system factory acceptance testing, we'll still continue to correct the test variances that we've identified in the various subsystems, close the gap on some of the test cases that needed to be more fully developed, and then also so the plan is to basically, within the next few months before exiting out of site performance testing for the pilot lines, to actually get interim software releases to, validate the updated the updated functionality. Next slide, please. Another critical activity that was noted by the IEC in the last report was the verification and validation of our PTC Vital database. And I'm happy to report that this particular activity is finally moving forward. The contractor has completed the work on the pilot lines, and given adding additional resources as well as really validating the process for this on the pilot line, we're able to create a schedule where we'll have all of our lines completely validated by May in advance of field testing.
Deb, I just want to point out for those who are following along, just so that you know, this presentation that's up on the screen is the CPOC presentation, which is a little bit different from the presentation that you have in your book. We had problems pulling up the joint committee presentation, so it's not all that different, but if you're sort of going back and forth, that's why it's not exactly the same as what's in your book.
Yeah, these slides are the same now. As I reported, we're continuing with deliveries and installations and also training. And, really importantly is we already started field testing. So as part of that activity, both on our pilot lines and our test tracks, we've been able to demonstrate certain PTC functionality and gain some confidence in elements of our system design. So we've been able to demonstrate positive train stop, temporary speed restrictions where a train is actually getting a TSR list and able to enforce that particular speed, accurate stop, and also turn back functionality where a train is changing direction of travel at interlockings. So the next two slides are the ones that are not part of CPOC, that are part of your book. So if you look at your book, the next slide is specifically for Long Island Railroad activities. Long Island Railroad completed, like I had said, the office FAT. We're starting our integrated system prefat with open variances. We will be getting interim releases through the end of the pilot site performance test period. And we're also giving the contractor a little bit more time to develop the roadway worker protection system, which is expected sometime in May. We started the installation of our OBC onboard software for our M7s, returning those trains into service after implementing that software. We awarded an installation contract for a third party to install roughly 35,000 feet of PTC cable in Atlantic Tunnel. That work is critical for our completion of installation work, and we're working really hard with coordinating that work in the Atlantic Tunnel, given all of the service in and out due to Barclays Center events. We also awarded an installation contract in December for small business mentoring to upgrade the electrical and the HVAC infrastructure for our primary control center. It's targeted for completion in May. And we also configured and tested our backup control center, where we're starting our pilot testing from workstations coming out of our movement bureau. And then we're also starting the surveys and designs for our remote locations, where various workstations will be installed throughout the system. The next slide is the Metro North specific report. They're still in the process of implementing civil speed enforcement on all their lines east of the Hudson, and their target is to complete that in first quarter of 2018. As part of that effort, they installed, tested, and commissioned roughly 2,500 transponders over 720 miles of track. They already began operating equipped M8s with civil speed enforcement, and will, as Kathy had reported earlier, begin operating M7 and diesel contests with CSE in March, and then on the M3s in April. As I had reported, they started and completed their office FAT, not with the success rate that we had hoped to get, but we nevertheless will proceed with the integrated system FAT. Similar to Long Island, demonstrating PTC functionality on our Port Washington line, Metro North was able to demonstrate similar functionality on their test track. They also completed the wiring and testing of their emergency control center to support pilot testing, and they also advanced interoperability testing with their tenant railroads, monitoring the civil speed enforcement, the data logs from the computer to ensure proper functionality, and they're also starting to schedule testing on their test track with these tenant railroads. The next slide is a little bit complicated, also at the request of the board to be a little bit more transparent as far as our schedule. This will give you a little bit more indication of the complexity of the situation that we're in. Try to make it as simplistic as I could, but just looking at the top line indicates the subsystems for the transponders, the wayside interface units, the onboard, and the communications. And like I had said, this work is completed enough for the pilot, and we're giving the contract additional time to complete the closure of some of the test variances that we uncovered during testing. So if you look at the, I don't know if this is working. No. The first diamond on that first bar shows roughly where we're at today, and the second bar will show when we will, somewhere in May, when we plan to get a new release. That coincides with the office software line on the second bar. As I reported, we just completed the FAT. We will try to close out as many variances as we collected during the factory testing, and then continue to do a pre-FAT and an FAT for the remaining functionality, including the roadway worker protection system that's coming in May. So when we complete the correction of all those test variances, we will try to roll out a second release for the integrated system FAT. We're already starting the factory acceptance, the pre-FAT for the system integration test. We're somewhere in the February-March timeframe. That green bar will continue into the formal factory acceptance testing, conduct variance corrections, and then try to get a new release. The last bar shows the pilot testing. So we're already starting with a pre-FAT software version of the integrated system in the field right now. As part of that, we'll go ahead with our site performance testing. We call that preliminary site performance testing. And at some point, when we get the new baseline, after completing the site update period. So the site update period is the time frame when we will actually be in the field with the full-blown, mature set of system integrated software and really see if we have any real-world issues. You know, you can only test so much in the factory before you get to the field and find other anomalies. So during that period, we'll collect as much test variances as we can with the testing on the pilot lines. And the plan is for us to not proceed into the SIST, which is the Site Integrated System Test Period, until all of those test variants have been corrected and returned back to the field. After the conclusion of the Site Integrated System Test, which is testing the system under simulated load, also testing spare capacity utilization, system performance, those non-functional requirements to make sure that the system is reliable and safe, we will have collected enough data to prepare our application for the FRA, for the Revenue Service Demonstration. We've already started preparing that paperwork. The plan is for us to submit that paperwork sometime in June. We've, as part of this schedule, we've assumed that the FRA will provide an approval, given that we've given them everything that we're supposed to, within a 2-month period. That's an assumption on our part. We've had some verbal conversations with the FRA to validate whether that's enough time, and they assured us that they would work with us. So that's a 2-month period. And the by August, the plan is for us to place our pilot lines in revenue service demonstration, which basically means that we have the benefit of being in PTC operations. And the concept is that most functionality issues will be uncovered during the pilot demonstration. We will basically request formally to the FRA an extended revenue service demonstration for the non-pilot lines. So in the next few slides, that will give you a little bit clearer picture of what that plan looks like. So for Long Island, as you can see, the red bar is when we submit our application. While we're waiting for the approval for the application, we will have started the site performance testing for 3 lines. And we will ramp up as necessary to 6 lines if necessary to meet the deadline. And as part of the revenue service demonstration, like I had said, we will not start revenue service demonstration on the non-pilot lines until the point where we have the approval from the FRA. So that's roughly another 2-month period. And that's an assumption as far as, you know, being able to demonstrate enough runs to the FRA where they're assured that we can carry passengers on our trains safely. The next slide is Metro North's plan, similar to ours, to Long Island Railroads. They also have a wait period while they're waiting for their application to be approved. They'll start the site performance testing on their first non-pilot line. It shows that originally I think Metro North had 2 pilot lines, but they were able to submit a revision to their implementation plan, and they only have really 1 now. The other thing, too, is if you count up the numbers, it doesn't add up to 11. They were able to efficiently combine segments of their lines into one to to do their testing more efficiently. So they have less than 11 listed here. But they also, as you can see, their plan is also to place all of their lines in PTC operations by the end of the year. Next slide. So the next 3 slides show the major project risks that the team is undertaking and some of the mitigation strategies that are currently underway or are being aggressively planned. Every day we're looking at this list on a weekly basis, to meet the deadline. The deadline's not moving out, but however, based on the progress of the contractor and where we're at, we are continually mitigating those delays, in many cases assuming additional technical risks to actually get there. So one of the key risks is proceeding with the integrated system factory acceptance testing and also field testing despite open variances and also contrary to normal system engineering methodology. Everyone will tell you that this is not the way to go. However, in order to meet the challenge, we've got to aggressively move forward. So one of the things that we're doing is trying to focus on only those functions that are required to meet the FRA mandate, because we have a lot of other functions and capabilities of the system that are part of the contract but not necessarily required to meet that mandate. We're also looking at the test facilities for both Long Island and Metro North. We have separate test facilities in Pittsburgh. We're looking to see if we can maximize that test environment in order to expedite test closure and also to continue developing other functions. We're looking to remotely witness test cases so that that kind of limits having to send a team of people to witness testing, and also to be able to do it in real time rather than waiting while our approval is being approved. We can actually witness the test cases, within a day or so. We're looking to also expedite the delivery of our test labs to New York to support testing. Normally these test labs are required, at the end of the project to support, sustaining operations, but we're trying to use those test facilities to support testing and also to conduct things in parallel. The contract is also providing, as part of a mitigation, a cloud-based solution to give the entire test team access to the electronic tool that manages the requirements. This is the tool that we use to make sure that whatever test cases are being written appropriately have the coverage to make sure that all requirements for PTC are being met. We're looking to implement shadow mode testing to provide input and accelerate the completion of the SIST test period, and also to provide an initial view of the system performance. Rather than waiting till we get to the field, we try to do some of that work in advance under analysis and gathering of PTC data. And then as far as Long Island, since the development was deferred somewhat into May, we actually were able to demonstrate that function in the integrated system lab recently. We were able to see that we could send a TSR request via phone to the PTC SafeTest server over a Wi-Fi connection. So that gave us a little bit of confidence that the design that we have is feasible and just needs to be fully developed. Another key challenge is the systems integration. And like I had said, you can do as much testing in the factory as you can, but until you get to the field, you're not really going to know what you're going to face. And so we already, one of the major concerns that the test team has is the communications between the train and the wayside. And so as part of mitigating that risk, the railroads are looking to procure additional radio spectrum to minimize potential interference issues. And we're also have put together a trunk train to mimic a real train to speed up discovery of wayside communication issues. Another risk is the, which I probably is something that all other PTC, all other agencies are experiencing, is the difficulty in the acquisition and retainage of PTC knowledgeable resources on the project in order to meet the deadline. And we've been having many executive meetings with the contractor on this particular topic, and despite our urgency to them that this is really important to us, we still are not quite satisfied with the level of staffing that they've given us to date. They have been able to, just as easily as they add people, we're finding that people are also leaving, and it's tough to retain those resources. So what we're doing is, one of the things they're doing is adding staff. They're hiring outside resources as much as possible to support them in the areas of design and requirements work. The railroads also have their access to their own consultants, where areas where we have expertise, such as signaling, which is very limited throughout the industry, we've offered up these particular resources to support the work that the contractor is doing to fill in the gaps. We're also looking to hire retirees to help, who are familiar with our operations in order to support field testing. So those are some of the things that we're doing. The next slide. Another risk is our ability to meet the requirement for interoperability. We're still trying to finalize our agreements with Amtrak. Recently, the managing director for the MTA has reached out to executive management over at Amtrak to, put a little bit pressure on Amtrak to support us in finalizing these agreements. We have submitted letters of understanding to them. We have many meetings ahead of us to discuss it. We've already made technical decisions on, how to interface to each other. However, there's still the confirmation of those designs and also making sure that they get implemented. And another avenue that the railroads are taking also is directly requesting support from Amtrak's PTZ vendor to review some of the critical interface design documents that we have to confirm our design so that we can minimize risk also. Because if anything changes on their end that we're not aware of, that could potentially risk the completion of the project. We'll have to come up with some other workaround if that's the case. The other risks that I discussed is some of the assumptions that we made in our project schedule regarding the response from the FRA. Fortunately, we've had a meeting recently and we discussed, they were able to give us some informal guidance on the RSD application, so we're hoping that that will help streamline the approval process, and given that we will be submitting what we think that they need as far as the application. However, we all know that they'll be getting requests, similar requests from 40 other railroads at the same time, so there is a risk that they will not be able to handle the volume of documents that they get during this short amount of time. And then the last risk is the Port Jervis line. As we had discussed earlier, we're depending on them to provide their design and also their equipment. And one of the things that we've done is we've met with their executive management. We've requested a proposal to support the implementation of civil speed enforcement and a procurement strategy to try to expedite the delivery of their PTC equipment to us. The next two slides are just a timeline in lieu of the slide that we previously had, which was more visual. This is a sort of a narrative listing of all of the key milestones from now until the end of the year. And, we'll be updating this slide to indicate, when we're in, for the next, like in February, our target is to complete. We did complete it early February. And also to Metro North will complete the implementation of civil speed enforcement east of Hudson. So as you can, as we go along in the next few months, we'll be updating this chart. Any questions?
Just, I appreciate the in-depthness of the report, but there's been some recent press reports that have pointed specifically to the Long Island Railroad and questioned as to whether or not it's going to meet the PTC deadline. What's the disconnect in terms of that? And as a follow-up, are there, do we file updates with the USDOT FRA, and if so, could we as board members get them so we're just in sync of sort of the raw data that's being shared with them in terms of the progress reports that we're having?
I've had many meetings recently in Washington with both the FRA and also recently with the bureau that handles the RIF loans. And for whatever reason, they didn't know the status of our project, so I actually gave them a similar presentation that I just gave you today, and they were very happy to hear that we were on target, that we were moving forward in trying to complete and get all of our lines in PTC operations. I mean, there are critics out there. I mean, don't get me wrong. This project is highly aggressive. We will not be able to afford many obstacles to get to where we need to get to. But, you know, like I said, on a regular basis, we're meeting with the contractor at the highest levels. We're managing the risks associated with moving forward. And we, you know, right now, I mean, within the next few months, we have really critical milestones that we have to achieve. A lot of them related to these system integrated factory acceptance testing. And, you know, hoping to move forward with field testing, we'll be able to, you know, identify some of those problems, those technical problems earlier rather than later, and try to roll those into the corrections that are going to be made in the factory. So, yeah, we have a lot of critics, but our plan is to get done by the end of the year. And right now, based on the schedule, we have an opportunity to make it.
And the FRA reports, you'll be able to furnish us with them? The ones, do we file reports to the FRA?
Yeah.
So can we as board members get what we're filing?
Yeah, it's the same reports. The presentation that we give at CPOC and to the committee
is the same one.
It's the same reports that we're giving to everyone.
Okay. That isn't there formal filings? Okay.
We've got a quarterly report that is very much a statistics-oriented, and it only measures completion. It doesn't measure progress like this report does. They've been criticized a lot for those reports in terms of conveying the wrong message to the folks.
So you can put context around it, but just so we at least see it, because that's what they pointed to in the articles that I read.
We can send it to you. I can also tell you it is available on the FRA website along with every other agency who is working on BTC. So,
and then just to follow up, so you made the point. I'm just trying to gauge like certainty here, because you know there's a lot of things here that we need to rely on other people or other agencies or things to happen and fall in place. And you said at the end of our last commentary that we're in a position where we have the opportunity to make this deadline. And so I guess when I hear the word opportunity to make, makes me less comfortable that we're going to make it. And so are we talking that we have a 50% chance of making it, a 70% chance of making it, 80%, 90%? What's your, I'm just trying to handicap. I mean, because at the beginning of your report, I kind of felt like we have a 100% chance of making it. By the time I got to the end, I was down to 50%.
I don't think I can give you a percentage. I mean, the next few months is critical. We've got to get to achieving the system integrated FAT at a highly successful rate and proceed into field testing. We have a lot of demonstration and we have a lot of work ahead of us. I didn't mean to be, sounding like I think like I said, there are a lot of critics out there. We have a plan. We're going to march to the plan. It shows that we can make the deadline, and that's what we're going to try to do.
But we shouldn't be leaving in your, I just want to make sure I'm getting the right message, right? I appreciate the plan, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness of the plan and sharing all those metrics with us, because it's going to enable us to sort of monitor, are we getting through the milestones, are we running into a problem, which I think was what we were after. So that I concur.
I think I'm trying to be transparent to you. I mean, we have a lot of challenges. I don't want to sound like negative or even second guessing myself as far as, getting the project done. But I think you have to understand that there's a lot of technical unknowns ahead of us with placing any system this complex into service. You can do as much factory testing, and we've already started to do field testing, but we haven't gotten all the way there where we have identified every known possible issue that we may have. And we do rely on a lot of different people to get there.
Understood. So not being on the board till just recently, did we get a late start on this, or is this why do we find ourselves, or was the schedule that was put forward by the USDOT too aggressive? Why do we find ourselves behind
we awarded this contract in December 2013, and the date actually for completion was probably a little into 2019. We actually pushed the schedule in, and there's a lot of things that have to be done. This is sort of like an R&D project. It's not as we took an existing system that had some proven capability on another railroad, and we kind of customize it for our operations. But our operations are much more denser than the other people. So there's a lot of work that had to go into putting the development. I mean, last year we spent a lot of time talking about installation of hardware. I kind of not, the focus more this year is more on the implementation of the software that goes along with that hardware and then integrating it. And I've worked on many projects similar to this over the last 20 years, and there's a certain methodology that you should follow to make sure that you're successful. But unfortunately, with the mandated deadline, we don't have the luxury of time. So what we're doing is we're proceeding at risk, mitigating it as we go, and doing everything we can to make sure that we're successful. I don't necessarily, as far as the late start, I mean, I only started in the project as well. It's similar, roughly 2015. But the contract always has, they have a lot of design submittals in the beginning that have to be vetted. We actually proceeded. I don't know if you know, but we actually proceeded with the development of hardware prior to actually, we haven't gotten to final design review. So we've also, started making equipment, installing equipment. As we're going along, we're testing, we're uploading software, we're making sure that there's certain functionality that is demonstrated both in the factory and the field, and that's how we're kind of proceeding to make sure that we're successful.
One last question. What's the repercussions if we don't make the deadline?
The repercussions is that we could be fined up to, I heard, $27,000 a day per train or something to that effect. It's a lot of money.
And I just want to add, for a project for which the federal government is giving us zero money. Zero money. We are paying for this all out of our own. So to indicate we have so many things on our plate, we have lots of things on our plate, and this is the most important one for which we're doing it all ourselves.
Mm-hmm. That's some penalty, though.
I'd like to add
I can only imagine. I would be significantly surprised if FRA ever tried to fine anybody for the failures that they preceded with this system. Most of the delays were their fault, not our fault, and I would be very surprised if we ever got to that point. Having said that, I think we have extreme confidence that we're going to meet the deadlines.
I want to add to that. This project has been watched in CPOC for a number of years, and the project came to the board saying, we're not going to make it if we can't go ahead in tandem. We don't have final equipment, but we don't have final program, but we have to start this equipment. And the board understood the risk. The independent engineer made it very clear to us we could be at the end and not know that they don't talk to each other. But we said, you've got to go ahead. It's that important for us to meet this deadline, and that's what they've done. I will tell you that I have developed confidence in the ability to meet the deadline that I probably wouldn't have told you I had a year ago. So I have seen a great deal of progress. We were worried about just getting equipment. Now we're worried about getting to the end on time, but we can see the end. So I feel more confident, and I know Kathy has something she wants to add.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the purpose for having these actually in-person updates, we're going to have an update in the book every month, but we're going to do every other month. We're actually going to walk through this presentation. And part of the reason that we want to do that is to convey the challenges, because I think Debbie's been extremely clear that this is very, very difficult. And there are risks that we have some control over, and frankly, there are risks that we have very little control over. So I think the job of executive leadership here is to try to identify the risks that we do have a measure of control over and develop staffing plans and other resources and whatever we can pull together to mitigate those risks. The other thing that I wanted to sort of highlight, it was at the very beginning of Debbie's presentation, but I do think it's important, is that the other purpose here is to, I guess, identify for the committee those safety functionalities that we already have in place. Because I do think that we need to dispel the perception that PTC is this thing that you just sort of switch on at the end of the year, and until you do that, you do not have any incremental safety improvements, and that is not the case, which is why Metro North has been harping on the civil speed enforcement thing, because it is important, because it does protect against the types of overspeed derailments that we saw in DuPont, Washington a couple of months back, that we unfortunately experienced in Spite and Dival. We implemented, Metro North did EAPS 2 years ago now because of a very unfortunate employee fatality. So we have that functionality in place. We've had it in place for 2 years. So I want the committee to understand that there are incremental safety improvements that are being made short of full PTC that have made a tremendous difference in terms of the overall safety of the railroad. I think that's important for us to keep our eyes on that. But I think Debbie, I think, expressed it very well. This is a very tight schedule. We are proceeding at risk, and some of those risks are really beyond our control, but we are doing that. The other thing that we need to convey, third thing, is that we are working as hard as we can. I think I cannot convey to you enough the effort that both railroads are making to try to deliver this project as quickly, as safely as possible. It is our top priority. We have PTC meetings basically like every day, and I'm not exaggerating, because it is such an important priority for both railroads.
John?
I'm just I think also your point of going and briefing the FRA like you have is obviously important, because if they see you're making this effort, hopefully that will relax some of these penalties.
Yeah, we were actually called down to FRA about a month ago to meet with their new administrator. So each of the railroads met separately, and they were very good, positive meetings. I think that they were pleased by our progress. We had a good exchange of views with respect to the risks. The other thing that I want to say about fines is this is where this whole issue with completion versus compliance comes into play. I think we've talked about this at CPOC. There are sort of 4 interim milestones that if we meet those milestones, even if we are not fully implemented by the end of the year, that we have the ability to apply for additional time, and those fines will not be imposed. So we have a high degree of confidence that we will not face fines by the end of this year.
But the committee has taken the position that we will be in PTC compliance, and that's what everyone's aiming to do. I know we have an engineering discussion coming up.
Not a discussion, just one important clarification. We mentioned the 2013 date with regards to the date the SI contract was let. I don't want to leave you with the false impression that that's when we began. MTA actually had procurement starting in 2006, which is 2 years prior to the 2008 Rail Safety Improvement Act that required PTC. And we equipped an entire fleet of M8 vehicles for our New Haven side with Access 1 at that time. We also equipped locomotives since then, prior to the 2013 date. The biggest issue, as Debbie mentioned earlier, is that this is not off-the-shelf technology, and running PTC in a low traffic density area is a lot easier than running 700 trains at Metro North and another 700 trains at the Long Island Railroad and throwing in the Amtraks into Penn. It's a very complicated technological challenge, which is what's gotten us to the point of having very little margin in the schedule. The schedule we have is achievable, but the schedule relies on everything making its milestone. And again, that's why you hear some of the concern about, dealing with these issues. And as Kathy stated, we talk about PTC every single day.
I just want to clarify one thing. Once PTC is in effect, will it stop the train if there is a car on a grade crossing?
No.
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 Will it stop the train if there is another train on the track?
It will not stop the train if there's another train ahead of the train that's following.
Then what is it you would do to meet these two major crises?
I don't understand the last question.
Well, let me ask you the question. There's a train on the track, there's a car on the track. It shouldn't be there. It's stalled. If PTC can't do it, what can?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. So, that's human effort, you're saying, is the only thing. Now, how about the train accident in Maryland, I believe it was, where there was another train on the track? It won't stop that, will it?
PTC will not stop that. Cab signals and ATC would, which is what we have here in the Northeast.
And do we have ATC in effect now?
Yes, we do.
So that would not happen under the new approach, right?
Correct. Any place you would have a signal system in effect that has cab signals and automatic train control, that type of a misroute into a siding could not occur.
And let me just underscore the question. We have it in effect on the Long Island Railroad and Metro North. Is that correct?
Correct. We've had it in service across the MTA since the 80s.
Very good. Thank you.
Been asked to move quickly, so Randy, quickly.
So real quick, I'm not going to bring up about west of Hudson because you have no control over that, but it's a big concern. The M3s, Long Island Railroad is retiring all of them. I just hope that the M9s are here and running at that time. But I saw something, and I wasn't able to find it, that you're going to equip all 100 of the M3s on Metro North, but you have 138. So just that question was
The clarification is Metro North has an active fleet of 138 M3s. We're looking to have Bombardier equip PTC on 100 cars at Arch Street. The remaining 38 cars are being equipped at Harmon and North White Plains on property.
Thank you, and I appreciate the hard work that everyone is working to get this.
Additional questions? Norman.
Yeah, well, quickly, I appreciate your candor. I hope it's rewarded. I doubt it will be. People, they'd rather have a big story in the media about fear of this happening. People would rather pound their hands on the table and say it has to be done. But I thought your answers were very clear and very technically precise, and really good answers. I do have a quibble, though, with part of your strategy, and it's sort of a labor quibble. I suggest that the strategy of hiring a bunch of retirees, people that apparently don't know how to play golf or fish, to be one of your key labor inputs in here is not something I look as a positive strategy. Sort of a desperate-looking strategy to me. And at this point in time, if you do wish to make the deadline, I believe you have to get your human capital resources flowing right about now to have any sort of other people in place to provide those hours of service for you. Now, I do have a question for you, and enough of my speech making is, there's been a lot in the media, again, with this sort of hair on fire, if you excuse the expression, articles about Amtrak refusing to serve territories that do not have PTC in place, and that conceivably could interfere with Penn Station and certainly Jersey Transit coming into Sunnyside Yard. There could be a whole variety of sort of pollution effects from other properties. Have you guys got that in your on your radar screen? Are you worried about that now, or is that something that's just an ephemeral worry of the media?
Norman, if I can, it's our plan to fully meet the date, and that will become a non-issue.
Any additional question? In that case, we have a number of information items. Kathy, would you address these?
Yeah, I'm just going to list what they are at this point. We've got the adopted budget and the financial plan for 2018, the annual operating results for 2017, the annual fleet maintenance report for 2017, the diversity and EEO report for the fourth quarter of 2017, and a memo describing Metro North's March 18th schedule change. They are all in the book in case you have any questions.
Questions? Pat, information items?
Ditto.
He has the same. Are there questions of Long Island Railroad, other than the change?
Also includes the schedule change, but in addition to the schedule change, it includes the track work program.
Yes. Procurements, Metro North. Al?
Good morning. There are 3 procurements in this month's package totaling $7,444,830. There are 2 non-competitive procurements in the amount of $6,237,725 and 1 contract modification to a competitively solicited procurement in the amount of $1,207,105. There are no ratifications. And in the interest of time, I will skip over the supporting narrative and ask for a vote.
Is there a second? Questions? Yes.
We're doing the Metro North one now?
Just Metro North.
I have 2 questions on this. Focusing on the SAFT one, the non-competitive, it's the OEM sole source, right? And my question is, why did you not seek to include some form of competition in this?
We went out, this was represented as a sole source, sole provider of these batteries. We did, in fact, canvass the battery community, the people that support other companies such as the distributors of SAF batteries, plus also companies such as Hopeki, and all declined. We advertised this as a sole source and asked people if they could provide these batteries, and nobody participated, and that's when we moved it forward.
Now, this provider has a problem under SAI, correct? The parent company has a significant adverse incident. Have you given consideration to the appointment of a monitor to make sure we don't have it happen again?
There was actually a monitor imposed under the deferred prosecution agreement with the federal government and actually the French government, since it's a French company.
Is this the French monitor?
But the U.S. DOJ was part of that process. They completed the 3-year monitorship successfully.
Was this the French monitor?
It was a French monitor because it's a
French company. Do we have a monitor in this country? I have no confidence in a French monitor, even though I was born in France.
Yes. I think the issue is SAFT itself has no SAI. Total is, as you know, I believe, a giant energy company. Our ability to monitor Total, especially given that it has already completed a monitorship program, I'm not sure that it would give us much.
Why is it we do not have a monitor here? If there is a problem, again, it is on your head. Now, what is the problem? Long Island Railroad has a whole staff with K2 and the like who can do the monitoring. Why can't you?
We would have to reach out to Total, the French company, and seek to establish a monitor program. But again, they've just completed a monitor.
Total has a long history. You and I both know that history. And I'm suggesting to you that it is, in light of that history, appropriate to have a monitor in place here.
Chuck, I've asked Kathy to discuss this with you.
Yeah, in the interest of time, we can take this discussion offline.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you. Was that both of your questions?
The second part of my question is the SEPSA contract. Again, sole source, right? Now, would you tell me why we had to use the sole source again here?
Absolutely. This was, SEPSA was the provider of all of the video equipment that's provided on all of our rolling stock at this point in time. This is nothing more than a continuation of the additional units for the additional M8s that we bought. There was absolutely a need for both the software and the actual hardware that was put in the whole rest of Metro North's fleet for continuity's sake. It wouldn't have made sense for us to go out and separately procure just for these particular units. These units will also be fully installed and integrated because it's already designed in the current M8 system when the cars arrive in September of next year.
My concern is very simple. People ought to have a right to compete. We're not advancing that cause.
We would certainly compete this if people had a ability to get awarded a contract. In this particular case, the decision was made not to do so.
Could I have a vote, please? Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Duly marked? One opposition? Okay.
Chuck, on all three or just the one? Chuck?
On what?
On which ones? All three? Okay.
I'd like just the two? Okay. Richard Mack, the Long Island procurements, please.
Morning, Madam Chair, board members. The Long Island Railroad presents 3 procurements for your consideration and vote this morning for a total of $31,250,000. The first one is a request for board approval for a sole source miscellaneous service contract to LIRR Inc. in the amount of $249,000 for software modifications to the Long Island Railroad's Tower Divide Signal Control in Hicksville to incorporate the mainline second track from Farmingdale to Ronkonkoma into the existing SCADA system. The second one is for approval to exercise an option with Progress Rail Locomotive, PRL, formerly known as Electric Motive Division, to extend a period of performance of PRL's contract for an additional 2 years through February 2020. Increase the funding by $30 million. This option will permit us the continued procurement of additional spare parts and any updates required to operate and maintain the LIRR's fleet of diesel, electric, and dual-mode DM fleet diesel locomotives. Lastly, the Long Island Railroad seeks your approval on a competitive change order with for the amount of $1 million for a joint agency Long Island Railroad Metro-North contract with the RAM Maintenance of Way for specialty excavation railvac services needed to support the Long Island Railroad Track Department. This will result in a contract value of $11,699,000 and a period of performance that will run through the period of December 2019. This contract, the base contract, was recently brought before the board just last year, and the prices for this change order are consistent with the pricing in that competitive solicitation.
I move these items. Is there a second? Questions? Hearing none. Those in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Thank you. Thank you, Jano. You have no procurements. Agency reports, quickly.
Yeah, super quickly. The agency reports on both railroads' operations, finances, ridership, and the capital program are included in the agenda book. If you have any questions, we're all here.
Questions? Hearing none. The railroads will meet separately next month. Motion to adjourn. Second. Those in favor?